Your love is deeper than this world will ever show, and all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And I've been deceived, yeah, but haven't we all? I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. Well, I don't know why, and I don't know where, and I don't even know how, and I no longer care. but I've seen your face and I've heard your call. Yes, I've seen the sun rise and I've seen the sun fall. I've seen the sun hang like a flame in the sky. Yes, I've seen the sun turn and I've seen the sun die. And I often think now, before our time is run, will there be any thoughts for what we have done? Well, I don't have much money and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. I am your host for today and always, I think. I have had other hosts occasionally filling in and doing a great job. My special guest today is Glenn Sackett. Great to have you back on the program, Glenn.
Hey, Peter.
How are you
Good
today?
to be here.
Yes. Look, it was I was Googling you this morning and I thought, and up popped our interview of 2 years ago. And I thought, wow, I didn't think it was that long ago.
That long?
And so Glenn Sackett, he's a board certified chaplain and apprentice of Jesus. And you're a regular contributor into the comments section there at our SDAQ&A Facebook group. I always appreciate your comments. Find them very interesting and stimulating, and you're willing to speak your truth. How do you enjoy the involvement there that you have?
Oh, I appreciate a lively conversation, thoughtful exchange of ideas and understandings. I learn.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
I maintain a wide range of Facebook friends, which other people sometimes don't understand how I tolerate some of what comes on my page and comments. But it's because I learn from such conversations.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page with that, with a wide, diverse range of friends and Facebook group interactions. Yeah. Look, when we chatted last time, and oh, by the way, I've had some success. Those that are watching in the Facebook group, you get to watch today. I'm fine. I stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning working out this big change in Facebook. Facebook has changed their policy, and no one can go live into the group via third-party apps. But there are some workarounds, and I spent a lot of time last night working that out. So if you are watching in the Facebook group, please comment. I can't bring the comments onto the screen if you're in the Facebook group, but I'm watching them on my phone down here, and I will bring them up as they come through. So if you are watching right now from the Facebook Facebook group, please add a comment just so I can see it's working. Cross fingers. We've got our wonderful YouTube audience watching and writing comments. And also, I've begun going live to our Facebook page. So not my personal page, not the Facebook group, but Facebook pages. And if you are watching and you'd like to watch live from there, you can. And here's the great thing. If you do watch from there and write a comment, and Peter Veach, if you're watching, head over there now, check it's working for me, write a comment. And those comments do come up on our screen here. So I can bring them up onto the screen. So that was just a little bit of, yeah, there we go. Peter Veach has just written. And I'll just bring it up to check. You found links on SDAQ&A site, the public, and shared. But I don't. And you put it on SDA Fight Club too. That's awesome. Thanks, Peter. The great thing there is you'll notice if you write from the Facebook page, your name comes up. It doesn't just say Facebook user anymore. So quick recap on that. YouTube's going great. Awesome. Say hi, add comments. Facebook group, please write a comment so I can check it's working. And Facebook page, go ahead and see if that's working. Write comments. They will come on the screen. There we go, Glenn. That's enough of all that kind of admin talk. Here we are.
Congratulations on getting that all hooked together.
It's a complex process, and I'll get quicker at it every time. But yeah, no one knows why Facebook has done that. And there are people that provide content into Facebook groups all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of people are just pulling their hair out. So it's it's not just a me thing. It's happened to everybody. Yeah. So look, 2 years ago when we had our last chat, a photo had been posted in the Union Facebook group here in Australia. Excuse me. And in the photo, it was just men pictured, the team of men at the Union. And I'll show you that photo.
I remember.
I wanted to chat a little bit about it. So I can't bring it up on the screen, but there's the photo. And we talked about
a little closer.
Let's see if I can.
Yes. Good.
That's the photo there. Now, someone about 2 or 3 weeks ago wrote on my on that post. So I did a post about it. Someone wrote on the post, and that then brought the Facebook comment post back up as if I'd just written it yesterday. You know, those Facebook kind of reminders or memories or whatever. And instantly I had all this kind of pushback. And there was a couple of interesting things I wanted to note about that we talked about then. We get a chance to talk about 2 years later because it popped up again literally just a few days ago. And a couple of the things I wanted to address from that photo, I'm going to try and bring up on the screen some of the comments. I just want to read out and get your thoughts on, because I think people misunderstood what I was trying to say by that picture. A, I'm not saying there's no good men in there. B, I'm not saying that there aren't women in ministry within the Adventist Church. I'm not saying the church doesn't offer many roles for women in ministry. My point was that in that picture, there were represented 23 different jobs, and only 10 of those jobs can women apply for just because of gender. So my thought isn't, oh, here's a bunch of good men working for Jesus and the Adventist Church, let's mock that. No, my point is there's a hidden, deeper thing going on behind that based on gender. I thought there was way more job opportunities for women in the Adventist Church. Not talking about women in ministry or roles as a woman in the church. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about employment opportunities in the Adventist workplace here in Australia. I don't know if it's changed in the last 2 years, but back then I was told that of the 23 jobs represented there, only 10 were available to women based on gender, based on ordination. That's what upset me. That's what I was observing. That's what I wanted to comment on. But I had the pushback largely supportive 2 years ago, but because I did it, they thought I was doing it again. They were like, "Oh, you're still banging on about this kind of thing."
It's just still there.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
it just happened to be 2 years ago. So, I'm just gonna bring it up and just read a couple of things from it. I'm actually it's quite small on the screen, so let's actually, not bring it up. But I will read it. Just a couple of comments. So Edna Soderman wrote, so this is now 2 weeks ago. Peter, you never look at people. You need to look at Jesus, our example. That's where things have gone wrong. The devil does a very good job of things when you look at people. Okay. And that was kind of representative of quite a lot of people's comments to me. And I'm just using this opportunity to be able to clarify. I'm not looking at the people. I know a lot of the people in that picture, and they are terrific individuals doing a fantastic job. I'm not upset about the people. I'm commenting on a system in the Adventist workplace that half the jobs in the union women can't get just because they're women. Here's another one I just wanted to address. James Standish wrote a really good reply, and it's quite long, but I will read it because I think it's a really good reply.
James makes me think.
What's that?
Whenever I see his writing, let's see, what has he got to say?
Yes, exactly, because he's often very smart, very erudite, articulate, he's a great guy, fellow musician. And he did a bit of pushback on me, but I appreciate that. I love when people push back and we can have a dialogue, you know. So anyway, he said, many of us who love Jesus and love our church. Here's the theme we're talking about today. You and I are going to be talking about love matters. What does that mean? We're going to explore that today, and I'm looking forward to that. A lot of these people have been saying to me, don't look at the people. We need to look at Jesus. James has just said, many of us who love Jesus and love our church. This word love is coming up a lot. And it's implying that if you push back, maybe you're not allowing the love of Jesus to flow through you and you're just focusing and being critical. He goes on to say, I have our church that I've worked on this issue. I stood up and spoke in favor of women's ordination in front of 60,000 people at the worldwide session. The delegations from the US, Europe, and Australia generally supported women's ordination, but it is, as a worldwide church encompassing people from all backgrounds, among the most racially, ethnically diverse organizations of the planet, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's just saying there that for the good of the whole of the planet, the church made that decision. The no vote wasn't about whether the whole world should vote women in or given the opportunity to be ordained or not. The vote was about, can the areas in different parts of the world decide for themselves based on their own cultural needs? That's why Ellen White set up the unions for that very reason, to have that diversity, that opportunity to go. So to say that the church needed to think of the whole world when making that decision is an inaccurate assessment of that vote. That was a no vote on, can individual unions and divisions decide for themselves? So I just wanted to highlight that. As Darren notes above, things are changing. I know this personally, as my wife is a leader in the Adventist Church in North America. You can work for improvement, all the while recognizing the immense good the Seventh-day Adventist Church does around the world. I agree. Exactly. I think things are changing. We can work for improvement. But just because someone highlights a flaw that can be addressed doesn't mean you're not loving, doesn't mean you can't focus on the teachings of Jesus, doesn't mean you can't recognize the Seventh-day Adventist Church and all the good stuff they do.
I think that when we talk about this, it's important for us to say we can do better.
Yeah.
It's not a you statement, it's a we statement. We can do better.
Yeah. And initially
we're doing some things very well. We can do better. Those are both true.
Yes, I agree. And then at the end of that, I won't read the whole thing, but he just said at the end, my suggestion, Peter, is pick up your old great controversy, dust it off, and give it a read. Then open a newspaper and read what's happening in the US. If you don't see any resemblance, remain steadfast in your denunciations of Adventists. But if it looks a little familiar, you might want to wonder a little deeply as to why that is. I don't know if I pick up little kind of subtle inflections that I should shut up because I don't know what I'm talking about. Granville Kent writes, quite judgy, bah ha ha, compared with your public slapdown of my church. Nor, sweetie, need a cuddle? Will you do the Catholics next, Pete? How do you think their leadership team looks? Again, that's a bit of an ad hominem put down of me to kind of shut me up. What you say, Pete, doesn't matter. And B, yeah, I'd be happy to look at the Catholics. I'm happy to look at anybody. And as I said to you before, Glenn, I don't care if that picture was filled with all women or filled with half women, half men, all one culture and not another culture. I don't care what, at the end of the day, the outcome is. What I care about is that women and a diverse range of men and races and people have the opportunity to apply for those jobs. I don't know how much more clearly I can make that. I do not care if there's an equal opportunity that just looks like, okay, well, there's more men, or that looks like there's more women, or that looks like there's a certain race represented. I don't care what the outcome is. I care that that picture demonstrates to me that there's a flaw in the system that suppresses women based on gender. They are not even being given the opportunity to apply for those jobs. I'm not sure if that's making sense, Glenn, and I'm obviously a little bit worked up about it because I just can't believe the naivety of that. Someone else sent a picture of Jesus at the Last Supper and said, oh, so are you planning to, not follow the teachings of Jesus now because the only people represented in that picture are men? Like, I'm not saying that. How do I need to say it more clearly? Help me, Glenn.
Well, it's
why am I being
interesting.
misunderstood?
I've been an advocate for when God does something, I don't want to get in the way of that. Oh my, it's probably almost 40 years ago now that I wrote the first statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Chaplains Association, Healthcare Chaplains Association, in support of ordaining women in ministry who have been called by God. And I begin that statement with two important understandings. Number one, this is God who did the calling, not me, not you, not a committee. God did the calling. I don't want to be in the way of that.
Exactly.
Number two, in the pre-statement of that statement of support was because in this conference, Adventist chaplains, healthcare chaplains, at that time were about 100 strong, which is equal to one of the largest conferences in the North American division in terms of the number of ministers employed and in service in God's work. And we had just had a conference together, and I said, in this conference, having been blessed by the service of women in ministry among us, we hope that we can support them and that we can make room for them and that we can acknowledge them equally to the men who God has called into ministry.
Yes, and
I don't think this should be a political thing. It should be, how are we responding to what God is doing in the world?
Why do you think? Because I agree with that, and I even think there is a place for there to be equal representation and maybe in a religious movement even more so. Maybe that picture should have had a diverse range of cultures, races, women, men, you know, but so can be a place for that. But what I saw in that picture was great people. But why wasn't there an equal opportunity given to women to apply for all the jobs represented there? So say God's calling women to ministry, calling the local guy who's not even an ordained minister, but he's really good at his at administration in his church. If they're being called to leadership positions, who is it in the Adventist church that's deciding that that shouldn't happen? Is that an ethical thing for workplace practices to decide based on gender or ordination if someone can get a job or not? I'm trying to work out why people can't grasp it. That's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm really bad at articulating. Maybe I need James Standish to kind of say what I'm saying in a really clear way. But I'm not having a go at the men in the picture. I feel it's great that women are called to ministry and that the church offers wonderful opportunities for women in ministry. But when I see that because of gender, women aren't allowed certain positions, I see that as unethical. I don't see it as theological. I think that's a tool of suppression. So who in the church? Well, obviously the leadership at the very top has said it around the world it cannot happen. What an opportunity to go, hey, yeah, the different unions and divisions on the ground can decide for themselves. Was that a missed opportunity, do you think?
Oh, I think there is inertia. There's inertia. Anything that's alive has to grow to be able to continue to be alive. But against that growth, there is always inertia. And the inertia can be at the top, it can be in the middle, it can be at the bottom. You could turn that hierarchy upside down. It doesn't matter. Inertia is everywhere.
Interesting. Yeah,
and
yeah.
So it takes. I like the idea in space travel called escape velocity. To escape the gravity of Earth's pull, a rocket has to have a huge amount of fuel and power to escape the gravity, the inertia of being pulled to the Earth. Once in space, it pretty much goes on its own. It needs very little energy, very little fuel. But to achieve escape velocity requires a huge amount of energy.
Interesting.
And
Boy, that's a great
that's where
thought.
we are. I would give that the greatest amount of credit for why we aren't moving faster on this.
Yeah, I love that.
Second, it's a very complex issue. And anytime that we want to change something, who was it? Machiavelli, was it, that said change has as its enemy everyone who has done well under the old ways.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so it's very natural for people like you and me who see a better way to encounter, to be understood, to be seen and understood as critical rather than as change agents for improvement.
Right. Boy, I'm loving this. I'm learning something. Great, Glenn. Great insights.
That's what I hear when I hear, oh, you should read Great Controversy. When I hear you should look to Jesus instead of at the people. Well, it was Jesus who said, people will know you have been with me by how you love one another. It was Jesus who said, look at the way you treat each other. That will tell people. And it's really hard for us when we've put our trust in, and perhaps our life in, our energy, our membership, our enthusiasm into an organization, it's hard to hear somebody say something about it needs to change.
Yes.
And so partly it's inertia, partly it's very natural to be defensive.
Yeah,
and
that's
to not really even see the meaning of what we are saying when we say look to Jesus. That's why
yeah.
I identify myself as an apprentice of Jesus. I do not identify myself as Christian in the public sphere in America, because that means something entirely different to the world than what it meant to me as I grew up. So if I say I'm Christian, what that means to most people is, oh, you're one of those people that's trying to take over the government and shove your beliefs down my throat.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
that's not me at all.
Mm.
I would love for you to know my Jesus. I would love for you to understand how God loves you,
Mm.
rather than being critical of you and trying to knock you down and make your life more difficult. I would like you to understand how much my life is better because I'm an apprentice of Jesus.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
not trying to change you.
Yes. Yes.
If there's change that needs to happen in your life, I'll be happy to help with that. I'll be happy to help you understand what could be better.
Mm.
And I'll be happy to help you find the resources that would make that easier. And I'll also be happy to help you understand what's in the way of that improvement. What are the barriers? Where's something stuck?
Yeah.
If I can help you identify that so that you can take the next step, that's where I am.
I've loved everything you've just said there. Fantastic. Really good insights. And that really helps me personally because, you know, I might sound a bit frustrated or passionate about it. I'm not losing any sleep over it. I'm not worried
Right.
about it. I
Yeah.
don't mind that people have all different perspectives of who they think I am. Some like me, some don't. That's fine. I'm totally fine with all of that in life. That's just life. But I'm frustrated because a lot of the people that have pushed back on me in the last couple of weeks, the progressive Adventists, they're the ones that do want change. You know, James just said, I stood up in front of 60,000 people and said, I support women's ordination. How, with this inertia thing that you're talking about, why are the good guys the one, in my humble opinion, as I'm looking at that post again,
Yeah.
that why is it the good guys that go, oh, let's criticize, like you could tell, you know, the passive aggressive ad hominem attacks there were flying off the page in my perspective. Um, why would they stoop to that when they're the guys that, when I was an Adventist, we're all talking about change and agitation and let's be dissidents and let's bring about the change in the world. Let's be the change. They're the guys that were inviting me to sing, inviting me to, and then as soon as I attack their church, the church I love, you're slapping us down. Why are the good guys going, instead of challenging me on that, instead of saying, what did you mean by that? Let's dig deeper. They're like, oh, poor, go and run to mummy, you poor boy. And, oh, you shouldn't have left. You've betrayed us. What's going on there from a sociological, psychological perspective?
We grew up. We got older. There's not much of my generation anymore that is advocating for change. We all did in our 20s. Well, not all of us. There were a few people who were traditionalists even when we were in our 20s.
You're
But
right.
it's a natural.
The baby boomers brought about the global kind of revolution of change.
Yeah. But we have become much more appreciative of stability because we're looking at how are we going to live out the rest of our lives and hope the world doesn't change too much. There are a few of us still who really think that things can still get better. But that's not most of our generation, and most people who stick around an organization long enough to be the seniors and the sages in the organization are not pushing for change. The exception to that, I find very interesting, which is that those of us who are retired and no longer concerned about the impact on our job of saying what we believe and being clear about what we understand, there are a good number of people who have become more vocal and more clear about how we can improve the life of the church once they've retired.
Yeah. In my season 2, where I interviewed a lot of scholars and academics about the Glacier View Des Ford scenario, which I found fascinating. I loved it. Season 2 was a real explosion of interest. I noted that most of the people speaking up now were retired and their jobs weren't under their careers weren't threatened. So really I'm enjoying the baby boomers that are retiring, hearing what they've got to say. Yeah. A lot more authentic.
There's another factor in there. The last time I looked at the statistics, only 10% of my seminary class completed a career in ministry to retirement. We were the ones 10%. Who were fresh out of seminary within the first 10 years of our ministry when Glacier View happened. And by the way, I love Glacier View. It's my conference campground. I love going to Glacier View, but it has another meaning.
I know.
Besides being a beautiful place in the mountains that I love.
Yeah, where you live nearby.
That rocked my generation of ministers.
Yeah.
And to see the church destroy the work of so many people.
Yeah.
1 out of 3 of the people in my class in ordination committee were failed because of the issues that were flying around at that time.
Yeah, and at that time, a lot of the... Sorry, go ahead.
Where is that generation of people who went into ministry to help change the world?
They left.
They're gone.
Yeah.
They're not here anymore.
Well,
some of them left ministry, some left the church.
Yeah,
some did not leave ministry but left the church because they went to other churches.
Yeah, and these
very close friends who
did that.
Found other places for ministry.
Yeah.
And have done very well.
In that post, there was the post with the picture. There was one I did, and then there was the one that the union itself had put up, the original picture. Mm-hmm. In that list of comments, I also got a lot of pushback. And what I noted is I made a comment that a lot of the young people are leaving the church. So your Zoomers and what are some of these other younger generations that I've just flicked from my mind?
Gen X, Gen Y.
Yeah, the Gen Ys. There's another classic
Millennials.
Millennials, that's what I'm thinking of. A lot of those guys are really angry about this stuff. They're angry about the way the church treats the gay community. They're angry about the way the church treats women. And so they are leaving. And like you said, a lot of those back in your day left as well. So my thought is, instead of criticizing the people who are saying, hey, look, maybe there's an issue here we can address that behind the scenes you guys seem supportive of, maybe watch these kind of conversations, maybe listen to the former Adventists. Why were they disgruntled? What's going on? And again, I think this points to your comments on inertia. But again, why aren't the good guys going, something's not working here? This whole next generation that really does not like that picture. Over 1,000 comments happened on that one post I did. Of many young people going, right, we're out of here. This is ridiculous. They get it, but they're just not going to put up with it anymore. The millennials and the Ys and the Zoomers or whatever, they are done with that kind of thing. And when they see the little smart aleck kind of pushbacks and ad hominem attacks, they see through that and they don't want it. So the leaders that are in control now and have this ability to influence this next generation, why aren't they just open to saying, hey, yeah, look, there's some stuff here. Let's talk about it. Let's invite Peter in. Let's invite the millennials in. Let's have a little conference here and have some open debate. Not, oh, you've betrayed us for leaving, or you can't speak for us now that you've left, or how dare you say, I think I put a number on it. I said, oh, about 60% of young people are leaving the church. And someone wrote to me and said, no, where did you get that number from? And the irony is that when I researched where I'd got it from a quote that he had written, or had been a quote of his that had been used in a Record article. And in the title, it says, something along the lines of 60% of young people are leaving the church. And I wrote to him and I said, mate, that was you. That's where I got it from. And he said, oh, yeah, but that was an article about the church, the general Christian body in Australia, not Adventists. And I'm saying when Adventists write an article and say the church, they mean Adventists. And then I said, okay, so I got the 60% wrong. How much is it? Oh, it's closer to 40%. We don't really know.
Are we okay with that?
And I'm like, okay, so my point wasn't the number. My point was they're done with this. When they see suppression of women, when they see the gay community being put down and have no job opportunities at all, they are sick of it and they're walking out in droves. So I should have said walking out in droves instead of putting a number to it. Yeah. Again, this inertia, why are the good guys not going, oh my goodness, whoa, instead of saying, what was that great little line that Granville said? With your public slapdowns of my church, nor, sweetie, need a cuddle. Like when young people see that, they go, that is ridiculous. I had so many messages behind the scenes of people saying, what is going on with these guys? Why aren't they waking up to the fact that the young people are leaving because there's no action? Inertia comes to a point where you've got to hit that speed to leave the Earth's atmosphere. Does it ever happen? Does inertia ever reach the speed? And I think a lot of people are saying, well, if not now, when? And if not you, who?
Can I tell you how my journey has gone with this issue?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time, between 20 and 40 years ago, I spent a lot of time and energy on advocacy around women in ministry. It seemed that the trajectory of the conversation at that time was moving forward rather predictably, because Adventists are really Methodists, only 30 years behind. We know that. And just looking at the votes about women's ordination over a period of 20 or 30 years, starting in the 70s, or maybe, in the 70s, the trajectory was going up steadily to the point where we could anticipate that we had about another 10 to 20 years to go. And at some point there, it would cross the line and it would happen. So advocacy still seemed like a worthy expenditure of energy.
Fascinating. Can you just give me that timeline? Can you just give me that timeline again? When was this happening for you in real time?
I think the first that I'm aware of that the conversation really became well known was in the 70s, and then in the 80s It increased, the conversation increased. I think it was 1989 that our Adventist Chaplains Association realized that we had the largest number of women in ministry in our group that existed anywhere. And part of the reason for that is that women are very good at chaplaincy because they listen well, and because they have been socialized to be empathetic and to respond to people's actual needs rather than just to proclaim things. And so, because the opportunities were not great in congregations and non-existent at that time in conferences and above in the hierarchy, women migrated towards chaplaincy. Women who had called to ministry migrated towards chaplaincy because there was the opportunity. And hospitals and prisons and educational institutions recognize the need for people who have those gifts to be in chaplaincy in those places. And so here we had the largest group. No conference had anywhere near the number of women in ministry that we were experiencing. And no one else had the opportunity to see the fruit of their ministry like we did.
That's incredible. Like that's that's an unfolding of positive momentum happening right there.
Yes, it was. And it was at that time, I was president-elect, I think, of the Chaplains Association when we came to that point, and we said, you know, we have this experience. We should say something to the rest of the church about it because we have more experience than anyone else has. So that's when we wrote our first statement, sent it to the General Conference. Every year for like the next 20 years, we voted that statement or something very similar to it. Over that 20 years, we began to notice that advocacy was no longer the most important thing we could do, and that it was having a diminishing effect because of the culture conversations around the world in the world church were shifting. And so, being a director of pastoral care of a multi-chaplain staff in a hospital, I said, what is the most important thing I can do? What would help women in ministry who are clearly called by God into this service in his kingdom in this world? What's the most important thing I can do? It's not just talking to people in positions of power. How can I mentor? How can I encourage? How can I support? How can I guide? How can I hire? That's when I realized there were better places for me to put energy than to continue focusing it on advocacy and the conversation about the issue. I could do things that had a much greater impact by helping people find their way into the seminary that they needed to go to, whether it was Andrews or whether it was somewhere else locally, if they couldn't afford to go to Andrews, how they would get into the Association of Professional Chaplains so that they could become board certified and therefore hireable by the best hospitals. And so I shifted my attention at that time from advocacy to actually mentoring and hiring women into chaplaincy positions. And I helped others do the same thing.
That's interesting, because so what you're saying is that you saw this momentum building and building and building. The advocacy that you were doing was growing and continued. And you even had an idea of when a peak would be reached and change would happen. The inertia you'd have enough energy to boost into the stratosphere beyond the atmosphere. And when that didn't happen, you shifted your focus to mentoring and helping where you could.
Yeah.
And I think in all the comments I noticed there, that's what everyone has done. And so
Yeah.
when they see me come along and going, oh, let's advocate, let's change, let's make some changes, let's rock the boat and stir up the waters again, they're all like, oh, hang on a second. We've found another path. Our path now is to support women in ministry and send them down the right way and stuff. So
Advocacy is still important. It still
oh,
needs
yeah,
to be done.
that's right.
Um,
And I agree with that. And that's where I'm coming
mhm.
to that. So
It's
when
just that not
people,
all of us need to be doing that.
yes. So that's my point is
Yeah.
when a group of people, and I've seen this in my whole lifetime, and I've been surrounded by strong, powerful men and women working in ministry on all different levels. It's I didn't even understand this concept of women don't have an opportunity. It just wasn't even on my plate. But I've seen waves of advocates coming and going.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably grounds to say it's been going for a good 60 years. This kind of this new wave of advocacy for women has
Mhm.
started in the 60s, kind of. So I see these trends where the people like yourself, people I'm seeing in these posts, they're advocating fight, let's fight. And then there's a moment where you realize your intent, the point up here that you thought you were about to reach based on evidence in other communities and movements and denominations and the community. And so you think it's going to happen. And when it doesn't hit, there's a sense of, okay, what do I do? A lot of people leave. A lot of
Yeah.
people like yourself start going, okay, we're not going to give up, but we're obviously going to tone down our advocacy a little bit. And that's my frustration, I've realized, because I'll read one more comment from Granville, and then I want to go into love matters. I want to talk positively about this topic. I'm not all frustration. I
Okay.
see
I've
lots
got
of
one more
positivity.
statement too as we move in that direction.
Yes. So I'll read
that-
this one, make my final point. You do
Okay.
your thing, and then we're going to get into love matters and how you can be an apprentice of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about not being a Christian because of all the connotations, but an apprentice of Jesus. I love that, because even an agnostic can be an apprentice of Jesus, or
Mhm.
someone that's a full-on believer can be an apprentice of Jesus. I love where you went with that. So we'll unpack that a bit more. But just to this point of myself personally, seeing the momentum grow, Jan Paulson, grow, we're going to make it. Let's keep speaking up. Feeling like a lot of people my age were speaking up, and you're about 10 years different to me. There's a slight different generation there. Your generation went, and then kind of peaked, lost the momentum. My generation peaked, lost the momentum. For some reason, I've got a bit of momentum at the moment. And and a lot of the young people are just going, oh, forget this, we're gone. The older people are speaking up, but don't really have the teeth anymore. Sometimes literally, but I'm meaning metaphorically. And so when I see the middle group, the 40, 50s to 60s, that kind of a range, and I'm sort of all fired up. I'm going, where's everyone else? And they are saying things like this that I'll just read back from Grenville. And Grenville and I catch up for coffee. If he watches this, he's going to laugh. He's not going to be thinking, whoa. He's going to laugh, because he and I banter backwards and forwards like this. And we'll catch up on the program one day, or we'll catch up at a local cafe, and we'll be fine with all this stuff. So I'm just using this as more of a metaphor. What he said is what I feel like a lot of people are saying. He says, the church has faults. And this is what I think people say when they've come to the end of that momentum and they realize the goal is not going to be hit. They have to divert their energy, and they divert it to, hey, well, let's focus on love, and let's focus on Jesus, and let's do what we can for women, and let's really support this, and let's just not be negative anymore. There's something that they suddenly justify that they've run out of steam. So anyway, he says the church has faults. Yeah, of course. I'm not stupid. You can use, and he's saying to me, you can use the public profile it gave you, the church gave me this profile allegedly, to stage a big public walkout, adult tantrum. He's in, oh, Pete, you're just having a big tantrum, showing your moral superiority, which encourages some to leave the faith altogether. and this is the cruncher, or you can love it as Christ does, faults and all, since we all need grace. And you can keep serving and influencing. It's your call. And I just think, it's just classic. You've run out of steam, Grenville. You've lost the momentum and the inertia to bring about change. And so you're just going, hey, let's focus on love. Let's just work together with this. And what you're doing is slapping us down. And what you're doing, Peter, is causing people to leave. And we gave you that platform. And I just, I just sit back and think, okay, it's pointless me offering any advice because the good guys aren't going to do anything. The older guys are too long in the teeth, and it's too late. And the younger guys are going, hey, we're leaving anyway. So what's the point of me even having a conversation about it?
The point of having a conversation about it is that when you get enough people in the room together who are willing to grow and change, things can happen. I don't know if you've read Theodore Zeldin's book, Conversation. It's a tiny little book. It's not even a half-inch thick with hardbound covers. But it's a phenomenal book about conversation. That's the title, Conversation. He says that conversation is a very unusual and special kind of discussion. So we have lots of discussions, but conversation, he says, is very unusual. He was identified as one of the top 100 thinkers in the English language 20 years ago.
What's his name? I'm just going to write that down. I'm going to buy that.
Zeldin, Zelden, I believe it is, Theodore Zeldin. He said, conversation only occurs when everyone in the room is willing to change, willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to leave the room a slightly different person than the one who entered.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's great.
When I read that and thought about all the discussions that I had been in the church, in the hospital, in the community, in all the places that I've been involved in discussions, I immediately recognized what he was talking about. Now, another book about conversation that I've learned a lot from is Crucial Conversations. A lot of pastors have read that too, because we're involved in crucial conversations a lot. One of the things that the authors there said was that conversations always occur on two levels. One is the topic. What's on the agenda? What is it we think we're talking about? That's obvious. It's what's on top of the table. But the other level that every conversation exists on is the level of emotional safety of the people in the room. And what they say is that whenever one person in the room loses emotional safety in the conversation, the words will continue to flow, but progress will stop.
Right.
So words just go on and on.
That's very true. Yeah.
Somebody shuts down because they feel unsafe.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And they say that if you want, somebody needs to be watching that level of the conversation and stop the agenda conversation, the topic conversation, restore harmony in the room, restore safety in the room.
Yes.
Bring everybody back around the round table. If you do that, then progress will continue.
Yes.
So let me tell you the one thing that I remember from seminary, the most important thing I learned in seminary. Will Alexander came to New Testament class one day, and he started the class by saying this: your theology will never be any better than your anthropology.
Yeah.
We looked at each other around the room and went, what? What does that mean? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Well, of course, the most obvious application of that is if you can't preach to people where they live and you can't make the sermon land in their life, it's just going to go right over their head. But it has a lot more to do with the church and ministry than just how well we preach and teach. if we don't understand the human condition, and we just keep talking at this level up here about
Yeah.
what we want to talk about because it's interesting to us, or because it's in the 28 fundamentals, or because somebody said we should talk about it, or because it's on the agenda. And if we just keep doing that,
Yeah.
we can say a lot of words. There can be a lot of stuff
Yeah.
written and spoken, but no progress will occur unless we're bringing it down to the level where it
Yes.
helps people feel loved. Love
Yeah.
is the transforming power in the universe,
Yeah.
not talk.
Yes.
It's
Well,
love.
yeah.
That's
And
what Jesus told us. Jesus showed us that. Jesus
yeah,
taught that.
I,
So,
can I just read
with
my,
that in mind,
just before you do that, I'll just want to
mhm,
close off the my things I've been reading with what
mhm,
my final reply was to Grenville Kent for what was
okay.
going on, because I noticed that like I was influenced by your generation hugely. So when I was 16, you guys were about 28.
Mm,
And I was looking up going, wow, these, I'm
mhm.
not quite a baby boomer, but I was looking, these guys are changing the world. They're just,
There were a lot of us too.
a lot of you. And so when I burst onto the scene with music and my bunch of young friends, and we wanted to bring about the change that you guys had been advocating, you guys had all kind of gone, well, it's kind of not working. So you either left or shifted your attention. We came on going, here we go. And this audience we were now speaking to, that you're referring to, you've got to make sure you're speaking the right language to the audience you're speaking to, were actually no longer there or interested. And we were all wound up, ready to go. And you guys were like, yeah, we've moved on. The next generation, like, what are we talking about? We don't know what's going on. So it's funny that I landed into that. And then the current generation that are mine seem to have also fallen into this comfort of job and job security. But anyway, the last thing I wrote to that post was, hey, I wanted to thank Granville Kent and several others for being open with me. So many people tell others that they think, so many people tell others what they think they want to hear. And we spend our lives second guessing. People like me, I'm, what did you really mean? So I embrace criticism and welcome honest people. A true friend actually tells their truth and speaks authentically. So thank you, Grenville. I really value your willingness to be open with me. It's a rare gift. Thank you. Because I realized that if we were just going to keep going back and forth, I'm actually thankful that he was willing to publicly say that stuff in a way that meant he was telling me what he really felt. And then you can have a conversation. And he wrote back something along the lines of, yeah, my conversations with Peter Dixon are a little bit like playing tennis. We kind of, we're having a go. And my reply is, yeah, okay, well, stop spitting the dummy and throwing the tennis racket on the ground and stop banging me over the head about it. Let's play the ball. Let's talk about the topic. But the conversation ended then. The post disappeared. The conversation didn't keep on going. And what I'm hoping happens today through our discussion about love matters and the incredible things you've said about inertia, making sure that if you're speaking to an audience, and someone just wrote, Nikki Carlton wrote, that's why a lot of missionaries do damage, because they come into this demographic thinking that they're going to speak what they want to say to that audience, and they just do so much damage because it's not the message that audience is ready for or wants to hear or can cope with. Whereas if they came in with this idea of love being a verb and love matters, and what does that really mean to engage with people, talking doesn't bring about change. But I love what you said there, that the bringing in the love concept does. So I want to now explore that, and that'll help me calm down. That'll help me realize that'll give me a perspective of what am I trying to do. I love robust conversations. I love the diversity. I loved that post. I had such fun. Like I was, initially writing back and pushing back to them, pushing back, and then I thought, no, look, we're not getting anywhere. But I do value their honesty. But I want to feel like that can continue, but I don't want it to just be talk. I really want to see this
Yeah.
positive notion that women and men, the right person for the job in the Adventist church, does take place. How do we get there? How can you remotivate me not to just go, you know what, forget it, see you guys, I'm out of here?
I don't know. I'm going to take another page from Crucial Conversations. The authors of Crucial Conversations, which is based on research of hundreds of conversations that they've analyzed, short and long conversations, said two things together. One is that if our discussion is focused on positions that we take, and then we push back and forth about those positions, we can actually increase the resistance of the other side in that conversation, because they will, if I push you, you're going to hold tighter to your position. But if we would stop staking out positions and advocating for the positions and start telling our stories and ask each other, how did you get to think like that? Granville, how did you get to think the way you just expressed yourself? What happened that
Can I
brought
just
you to
say
that?
something there that will help me understand this better? He and I, on the women's ordination, would agree. He wants to see ordination happen. There's nothing about the actual topic.
Yeah.
So how do I have a conversation where we agree on the claim, but he feels that I'm betraying the church by kind of keeping on bringing it back onto the table, which I wasn't, as we know, it was 2 years ago. But
well, okay, now I want to make a big transition, but it starts in the same place. So let me talk about how my thinking changed. 2015 General Conference. Crisis of faith for me. I was seriously gut punched by that General Conference session.
Yeah, that's when I left. My crisis happened then, and I was gut punched, and I left.
Well, I seriously thought about leaving, and I could. I mean, I have no doubt that I could get another denomination to support my ministry and provide the signatures necessary to maintain my board certified chaplain status. But I also had looked into that enough to realize, and my ministry as a hospital chaplain has been an interfaith ministry, and my colleagues in ministry are more chaplains of other faiths than they are Adventist ministers. And so I have had lots of good conversations with people like that. And I realized that every other church that I had studied with or looked at or knew someone in ministry with, every other church is flawed too. And the challenge of changing to another denomination, because I got punched in the gut here, is that I know where the rocks are here. I know where the tripping stones are. I know where the slippery places are. I know where the hazards are. I know where the obstacles and barriers are. If I go to another denomination, I got to learn all that all over again, because their map is different from ours. And so I could spend 10 years finding my way in another denomination, and then I'd be in a place where I'm in a flawed church. Every one of them is. It's part of that, the anthropology of the human condition is that anything that we organize is going to be flawed.
The difference with Adventist flaws, though, is there's a loop that happens. It's not a flaw. Like every other church,
it really makes more sense for me to stay where I am and continue to do what I can.
Yeah, and I'm not judging that at all. When I said that gut punch for me made me want to leave, and I did. I have no judgment of people who stay, because I think, great, good on you. You're staying and breathing in this positive energy within the place that needs it.
Yes. And I respect your decision. I have classmates from academy who left the Adventist church and went other places because they were stifled and felt stuck and not very spiritual in the Adventist church, and went to other places.
Yeah.
And I respect the fact that they did what they needed to do to keep their spiritual lives alive, because a lot of our other classmates just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
They didn't make a connection somewhere else. They just let their spiritual lives slide.
And it genuinely,
so I respect the ones who did something positive for their spiritual direction.
Yeah, because like you said earlier, there's a need for people to do what their calling is.
Yeah.
We don't have to be little carbon copy templates of everyone else.
Right.
And that, I'm loving lately, I've been interviewing scholars and academics, Michael Campbell, Matthew Lucio, Dr. Denny 14. And I love it. I'm so glad that they're staying in there and writing these amazing pieces of work about Adventist history. So we're all called to do different things, and that's great.
As blessed as I feel being raised Adventist, grandson of missionaries, son of a preacher and a teacher, aunts and uncles who were missionaries, education superintendent, pastor, conference president, all kinds of stuff in my family. I feel like Paul sometimes. I have a pedigree that's pretty amazing in my family, and I'm blessed because of that. Yeah. But if somebody else needs to go somewhere else to be blessed, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I know God's bigger than any human organization.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God has no visible boundaries in human organizations. So I'm happy for anyone who takes seriously their spiritual life and journey and does what they need to do to make that be vital.
Yes, I agree. I love that. Yeah.
Here I am with a gut punch after 2015, and I'm going like, okay, now what? Okay, I'm going to stay here. I'm not leaving. What am I going to do? And I thought about this long history of advocacy, having shifted my attention to mentoring and hiring and helping women get into positions of ministry where they could bless others. And I realized I need to do something different, because Albert Einstein was the one who said it most clearly. You cannot solve a problem at the level at which it was created. And I sensed at that time in 2015 the futility of continuing to push that ping pong or tennis ball back and forth across the net, back and forth. And I just decided that I had had enough of that for myself. I hope other people will continue. But I need to come at this from a different level. And so I thought, what is the core of Adventist spirituality? Because I need to get my mind unstuck from this back and forth thing on this issue that's so important to me, because I'm feeling stuck and I don't want to stay stuck. So what am I going to do? And as I thought about what's the core of Adventist spirituality, I realized, well, it's Christianity. That was before the word Christianity got such a negative connotation in America. So I could still use that word. What is Christianity? Well, it's following Jesus. So that means that I will do better in my spiritual life if I put Jesus first. And I go back and I study and read and listen to what Jesus said, see what he did. How did he interact with people? How did he work with those apprentices that he had? I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that first, because that is where life is. That's where the life of the church comes from. It came from Jesus. So I'm going to put that first. What is next? Well, it didn't take very long, going back to the Gospel of John, and thinking about, what did Paul say? Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And even prophets in the Old Testament. What does the Lord require? Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It seems like everywhere I look, love is the operational principle. Love is the transforming power. Love is the mechanism of exchange of the kingdom of God. So that's my second priority, is to refocus on love, the primacy of love. Now, that wasn't the first time I thought of that. And I want to say a little bit about the importance of mentorship in spiritual growth. I hate to think about what my ministry would have been like if in my senior year of theological studies in undergraduate, I had not bumped into John Thurber. Because my focus on ministry was learning the truth and learning how to communicate the truth and learning how to preach and teach the truth and be doctrinally correct and truly Adventist. And I bumped into John Thurber, who was living in the Keene community at the time, Keene, Texas. Southwestern Adventist College is where it was. And he had a youth group that did music ministry. And by the way, I really loved the music that you had at the beginning of this.
Oh, thank you very much.
It lifted my soul.
Thank you.
I joined John's group, the Adventist Youth and Action Singers, Texas AYA. But a really interesting thing happened there. Before we ever sang on Thursday nights, I think it was, we gathered at his house. There was always some food on the table. Sometimes it was a meal, sometimes it was snacks. But there was also conversation. And between John and Patsy, there was always something that was inspiring, thought-provoking, inspiring. But the place was just filled with love. The room, the house was filled with love. And I felt it. And I saw it changing other kids my age, some of whom were in college. Some of them were just out in the community. They were not in college, but they were in the community. And John and Patsy just brought them in and loved them. And lives were transformed. And yeah, we did music together because that was one of John's things, and he was really good at. But he also never started to sing a song without talking about why he was using that song and what God was doing in that song for his soul, and how that song had changed someone's life. And then one night, he sent us out into the yard after we ate, after he had a devotional thought. He says, "It's a beautiful night. It's really nice out. Why don't you all go out, gather in small groups and pray?" And his talk that night had been something he had said many times before, but it was about God wants a relationship with you. He doesn't just want you to know the truth. He doesn't just want you to understand how to teach the truth or preach the truth or witness the truth, because not everybody in the group was in ministerial training like I was. And God doesn't just want you to be right. God wants to love you and for you to experience that love. So we go out in the yard, we gather in small groups, I've learned to pray with my eyes open because when I close them, it doesn't help. So I'm standing there in the yard under the night sky in Texas. And as one of my group members is praying, this immense meteorite crosses the sky and just rivets into my soul this message that John had given us that night in his loving way, that God loves us and wants a relationship with me. That changed the focus of my ministry. And from that time on, in addition to learning the truths of Adventism and of Christianity, I began to understand that it was love that was at the heart of Christianity. Jesus is first, love matters most. Partly because of how I saw it working in that group, in that setting, but partly because Jesus said it matters most. He said, people will know you've been with me by the way you love one another. That's how it works. And I'm really glad that I had that experience that early, because I was able to tap back into that at this time in 2015 and go, yeah, love is where it is. Later on, just a few years ago, I had another leap in that direction where I had a student who was one of my mentees in chaplaincy who had summarized her understanding of the theology of ministry. And she said, it's all in this phrase, put more love in the world. It was just that crystal clear to her. Put more love in the world. And I went like, yeah, of course, that's right. I knew that. Don't you love it when somebody says something profound and it raises you to another level, and at the same time you can say, I knew that?
Yeah.
I love it when that happens, whether it's somebody telling me or whether it's reading a book. I read something and somebody puts in words really concisely.
Yeah.
Something that I already knew, but I needed to relearn it.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I did that, and then I realized, as I was studying more about Jesus' ministry, it's servant ministry. And I figured out from all the arguments about women in ministry, and we were starting to tilt towards patriarchy, which I thought we had given up a long time ago. I began to realize that the stuck place in the conversation was because we have come to perceive ministry in hierarchical terms because the church has shifted more and more to a hierarchical model of command and control.
Do you think it has shifted, or that it just has always been set up like that? Like if you look at the James White model, it seems to be the same as the Ted Wilson model.
You know, we've bounced back and forth on that. I mean, it's a thing in tension.
When would you point to a time
as a baby boomer, as that 60s generation who were going to change the world, we abandoned that. And we were the biggest group in America.
Yeah.
And so we had the numbers and the power to change the conversation in America.
Yeah. Amazing.
Little did we know how much was being hidden from the patriarchal and hierarchical model, because it wasn't popular. There are a lot of people who still believed in it. They just got quiet for a while. But in the mid-teens of the 21st century, they started speaking up more and more and more. And now it's rampant.
Yeah.
But
it can't be hidden anymore.
Studying, it's not hidden at all. Studying Jesus' ministry, that's what I really realized was, okay, the third priority for me in my understanding of Adventist spirituality and ministry is Jesus first. Love is the operational principle. Love matters most. It is how things change. It's how people change. It's how my heart changes by being loved.
Yes.
And that's how I help other people change, is by loving them and putting them in connection with God's love. And that's a service. That's not power over them. That's power under them, lifting them So we talk about lifting each other up in prayer. That's a service.
Yeah.
It's not putting each other down in prayer. It's lifting each other up in prayer. Jesus talked about that person, that man, and man is the appropriate word here. Talked about that man standing on the corner praying, I'm so glad I'm not like them. That's putting other people down with prayer. We come to lift people up with prayer, to lift each other up. That's service. That's power under, not power over. And once I realized that if I could focus my ministry on Jesus first, love matters most, ministry is service, I can have my heart in this 100%, and I can pour the rest of my life into this with honor and integrity. Even though the church is flawed, even though the organization seems to me to be upside down, even though there is a rising ascendancy of patriarchy and hierarchy that I disagree with, I can still do this with honor and integrity. And if I can help others to do the same thing, perhaps we can change how ministry is perceived in enough places that everyone will have the opportunity to be of service. I still get hooked once in a while back at a lower level of consciousness where I want to push back and forth about things. But I've discovered that I don't stay there very long anymore, that there is so much opportunity for me to connect with being a mentee of Jesus, being a follower of Jesus, being an apprentice of Jesus, because there's always something more for me to learn. I can always find new ways to love. And I had a colleague that just said something to me that I hated when I heard it at first, because I was complaining about somebody who was giving me a hard time and making things difficult for me. And he said, this was Larry Houston, he was a chaplain, had also been teacher, principal. He'd had a number of important jobs in the church, but he was a colleague in my chaplain's department at the time. He said, Glenn, what has God got her in your life to teach you? Oh, Larry, did you have to say that? I know that's
What's
true.
The mirror?
And so when I'm in my better frame of mind, when I'm thinking like Einstein at a higher level, not at the same level the trouble started, I can say, okay, what is it that I could learn here? What is this person's opposition or this person's criticism or this person's position that they're holding on to, clinging to as if their life depends on it? What can this person teach me that I can learn and then understand others better?
When we were chatting off just before we came online, when I was trying to connect all the Facebook dots and stream codes, we were chatting a little bit about Jesus and the mentoring and being an apprentice of Jesus. And you pointed out that, I hope you don't mind me quoting yourself.
No, that's fine.
But, love is not all pastel pink and blue pillows. Jesus threw people out of the temple. He called the officials tombs. Was he operating at a lower level of consciousness by acting in that way, by pushing back and doing I mean, to call, if I called the people that were just ad hominem attacking me, if I called them tombs, that would have created even more tension. I mean, I chose to go, actually, I appreciate Granville Kent. I love that he's willing to, that's true friendship. I love that he's willing to push back publicly against me. As you are an apprentice of Jesus and you're learning from the mentor from the information that you receive from the Bible, the Gospels, etc. How do you respond to at times needing to, like you mentioned earlier, that you sometimes fall into that situation? But is there a time when it's not falling into lower consciousness, but it's actually pushing back, clearing the temple, calling the Pharisees tombs? I mean, I just want to understand that, where an observer could go, oh, Glenn has just called these church leaders tombs, and he's cleared his church with a bit of anger in his tone. How can we differentiate that with Glenn just falling a bit and stooping to kind of low-level consciousness?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have two ways of thinking about that. One is, when I love someone and they're doing something destructive, whether it's self-destructive or destructive of other relationships, it's really not loving of me to be quiet about that. I'll give you an example. I'll turn it around. When I was in my second quarter of clinical pastoral education, I was in a group of, I think, 7 of us that were chaplain interns. I was still very parochial in my thinking and my experience at that time. It was actually my first quarter of training after becoming a chaplain. And so I had just finished 5.5 years of ministry as a pastor in the Texas Conference. Still very parochial. But everybody else in my clinical training group was of some other faith group other than Adventist. And so I was being stretched to understand their faith and their differences, and to bless them rather than curse them, to be really blunt about it. I was at that time quite a judgmental person, and I was as hard on myself as I was on anybody else. And my colleagues one day, well, the person that I had the hardest time with, all the others were also Christian of a nature that believed in a God, a deity named God. But we had one person in the group who was not a deist. He believed in good and evil, but he did not believe that it was personified in any individual. I just could not wrap my mind around that. I just struggled with him. And one day we were talking about something in the group, and one of the people in the group said, "Glenn, you're angry." And I said, "No, I'm not." "Well, I feel your anger." And about 2 others at the same time went like, they were nodding their heads, and a couple of them spoke up, and I went like, "What? Angry?" And the guy who was not a deist said, "Glenn, I know you're angry because you're smiling in a particular way now that's different than the smile you have when you're happy and when you're good, when you're okay with things." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "You have 2 different smiles. You have a smile that's a genuine smile that we're having a good time together, and you have another smile that you use to cover up your anger. Now, that's not pink and blue pillow love." But what he said in that statement was so clear and so specific that I took that in, and I said, what does my face feel like? If I have 2 different smiles, I already knew the stuff that I'd learned in the 5-day plan to stop smoking to help people understand that it takes more muscles to frown than to smile, and all that kind of stuff. And I went like, ooh, maybe there's some embodiment here of when I'm angry and when I'm not. And I begin to feel the difference in my face when I smiled the fake smile to cover up my anger, than the smile that was a genuine, happy, we're good together, that's funny, I like you, you know, all kinds of things that we smile about. It was that deep honesty that could be called critical.
Yeah.
He was saying, in essence, he was saying, you don't have integrity. And that was true. He didn't use that word, but that's how I heard it and understood it. And he was absolutely right. That's what Jesus said to the Pharisees. And that's what Jesus said to the people whose tables he overturned, who were in the temple making it a money-changing house, a place of commerce rather than a place of meeting God. He was calling out their lack of integrity, of lack of acting on what they actually believed, but they weren't able to live it.
See, you must have had to have been at a certain stage of willingness to be self-reflective. When you talk about Jesus doing that to others, were they at that stage to be self-reflective? When you mentioned earlier that when you see people operating not from love and suppressing and hurting others, that's what I see these leaders in the church doing. And so I'm speaking that non-blue pillow loving critique of them. What would you suggest that people like yourself need to do to not just receive that criticism, but to follow Jesus as your mentor in giving that to other people? So when I replied to the Granville Kents and the other people in that group, to me, that's veiled. Oh, we're not unhappy with you, Peter. You're the angry one. You know, I pointed that out to them, but they weren't ready to receive that. And I'm not saying I'm coming from a pious position, which the claim was. I just know an ad hominem attack when I see it, and I called it out. But if you're just following love and Jesus and love matters, does that mean that every time we have to go, oh, thank you for that, and I appreciate that? I'm just trying to drill down on, is there a time to be the guy that spoke to you? Because you're speaking in a way that you're grateful he did, the non-deist guy.
He did.
And
I could have gone through the rest of my life with two kinds of smiles that would have confused me.
Yeah. So here's the big question I want to know is, how do people that are hurt by that photo, the treatment of oppression of women in the church based on this, not having an opportunity to even apply for half the jobs, more than half the jobs, less than half the jobs, what is can be seen as a justified response to that? Like, are we supposed to just love them back? And, you know, like, is that a time that you need to clear the temple? Is that a time when they need to be called tombs? Is that a time when the guy who was the non-deist to call you out? You know, you're saying there is a time. So let's talk to the audience. Let's talk to the audience that is unhappy about that picture. They're hurt. There's comments I can't even read on air in that post because of this. They're just so hurt. Young people swearing, cursing, angry. So when we see that and we're loving apprentices of Jesus, when is the time to do what that guy did to you? And what does it look like?
Well, my responsibility is to be a faithful witness. It is the Holy Spirit's responsibility to deal with the outcome.
That's what I'm talking about too, because my calling out their action, I'm not expecting them to change. So Jesus calls the Pharisees tombs. It's up to the Holy Spirit to change them or not. I'm talking about not, hey, when we do something, it's not up to us to make the change. I'm saying, what does it look like to actually do something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's another part of my education that was very lacking. I was probably halfway through that 5 years of pastoral work in Texas when I realized that almost everything I knew about the Holy Spirit, that I'd been educated about the Holy Spirit, was don't do this, don't do that, don't become Pentecostal, don't. Everything was like fear. It was like, don't touch that. And I thought, I really don't understand the work of the Holy Spirit. I need I need to fill that gap in my education. So I started reading everything I could in the Bible and Ellen White about the work of the Holy Spirit, because I just needed to fill the gap. I didn't know enough. I was being pressured at the time by a new Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph, a new conference president who only had one priority, and that was how many people can you get in the tank, and added to the church membership rolls. He said that ingathering was important. He said that money was important, that tithe was important. He said that a couple other things were important, but actually the only thing that we were judged on was how many people got baptized. And that was not my gift. My gift was public health ministry. My gift was training the leaders in the churches to be stronger leaders, because I was out there in the hinterlands where the small churches were that got new young pastors like me every 2 years.
I think you, sorry to interrupt, but I think you also, it's clear to me, you offer pastoral care to people, and they might be already members. So if you're offering pastoral care to these members, and you might bring in one new member a year, who's to say that what you were doing isn't even more important?
Well, what I felt the pressure was, I knew that it wasn't in harmony with my gifts, but I felt like that wasn't all, because I should be able to do, and I did try to do things that I could do. But it was in the study of the work of the Holy Spirit that I realized that not only did the conference have some priorities that were interesting, but that the way I had been taught about ministry had acted as if there was no Holy Spirit, that it was all my responsibility to make these things happen. And I discovered that it's not up to me. It is not any human's responsibility to be a spiritual director for another person for their life. So dragging people from wherever they are at the moment into the tank, as if that's the destination of their spiritual journey, is a misconception. It is the Holy Spirit who is every person's lifelong spiritual director. And so when we think about spiritual formation, there's a lot of good things about spiritual formation, but one of the things about it that's unfortunate in the English language is that we talk about spiritual directors. My friends from South America and Inter-America who talk about spiritual direction and who are trained to be spiritual mentors to other people, they say we're spiritual accompaniers because the Spanish language is used that way. And I realized I, as a pastor, am a spiritual accompanier for people. I'm there to walk alongside them on their journey, help them see what the next step is, take the next step. It's not my job to take them from where they are and dunk them in the tank as a destination. The Holy Spirit will see that that occurs at the right time.
So what I'm asking, though, is let's look at that Pharaoh that had that concept. You took on board what he was pushing onto you and thought, wow, this is not the Holy Spirit. We need to allow the Holy Spirit to work. And so you had a better understanding, a more Christ-like understanding of how to minister to those people. My point is, when you see a Pharaoh, as Jesus did, he publicly called them a tomb. In your, and I'm again not speaking of you specifically, definitely not, but to people who see the pharaohs, who see the guys who are descending into ad hominem attacks, who are criticizing the person not unpacking the story, who are doing nothing to bring about this change that they offer false hope for. And I'm not the only one. I'm symbolically using you and me as an example. Those who want to call that out and do, when is that considered a good thing to do? That's following Jesus, because that's what I think. I think it's following Ellen White. Ellen White was great at calling people out, and she said, agitate, agitate, agitate. But when we that agitate and when we that call people out do so, it feels like that we're criticized for doing that. And people say, hey, just focus on Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, I am. So I see the components of being an apprentice of Jesus are to have a time, a season when you do call out the pharaohs, but a greater season of worship, a greater season of making love the verb. You know, people see me on this show, you know, a couple of times a week, and sometimes I'm peaceful, sometimes a bit more like today. I'm trying to really work this stuff out. But the bulk of my life, like when you were talking about your music and worship and the prayer stuff, that was my life since I was a 4-year-old. You know, I was so fortunate to be in environments where there was music and singing and love, and then I'd sing every weekend at churches and have that beautiful experience of the community singing. And my whole life in the Adventist church was filled with love and focusing on Jesus. I would call people out, but it was a tiny bit. But I'm trying to point out and work out, for those of us who are dissidents, who are calling people out, why is there such a heavy weight to shut the person up? And what I've learned today, and I'm so, you know, so many takeaways from today. I'm gonna have to watch. I rarely watch my interviews back. I'm watching this one back because you've just got gems littered all through this conversation. But I'm trying to work out, and there's a thing on inertia that you were saying. I'm trying to work out if there's such a pushback from calling someone a pharaoh, is the role to go, okay, well, I'm just going to leave that to Holy Spirit. I'm going to focus on Jesus. I'm going to focus on what I can do to help people, and to forget about it, and to say, well, some people are called to do that and some people aren't. I struggle with this notion of, to me, that is so obviously a moment to call out the pharaohs. Why am I getting such pushback? And I can see, I'm so lucky. I'm very thick-skinned. Like I laugh when people criticize me. I welcome it. I really don't mind. I'm fine with it. And yeah, I might get passionate. I might even get angry, but I'm not concerned about that. I can place myself in those situations, and I'm a pig in mud. You know, I love that kind of conflict. So maybe I'm called to do that kind of thing. But to affect change, to build momentum, to get the inertia right, you need to have support around that. And my comment and observation in the Adventist church is the good guys don't speak up. They're silent. They hate when you call them silent. Oh, you just, you know, we stayed and you're berating us and you're calling us and blaming us. You're blaming us. Or the real conservative traditionalists call you a tool of Satan and you're a demon and you're a Jesuit. The momentum that brings about this inertia for people that speak out is incredibly tiring. It's like almost impossible to have happen. And when you guys were talking about, I think you mentioned in the 80s, where you could feel the momentum of the baby boomers, the biggest generation ever to hit the planet. You can see, oh, we're going to reach this point soon. Doesn't happen. That's frustrating.
Yes.
And so imagine me without my generation is the tiniest generation. We're the baby busters. We're the smallest little generation slotted in there. When we speak up and go, woohoo, come on, guys. Oh, no one's following. People are telling us we shouldn't. It's just even more frustrating.
I heard your question to be is
what
why
is
all the pushback?
I can get it from a sociological perspective.
I'm going to say it's inherent in the prophetic voice.
But it's the pushback from the people who want the change the most. When I criticize the Adventist church, when I criticize the church leaders, it's the women who want the change who criticize me the most. I got kicked out of a women's ordination group because they said I was speaking up too much in support of women's ordination. I was criticizing the leaders. They didn't mind support of women's ordination, but they did not like me criticizing the leaders. So it's kind of frustrating, but I'm having a discussion just to work it out. How do I better be an apprentice of Jesus, call out the pharaohs, but have a sense of purpose, that things are changing. The mantra is from these guys: things are changing, Pete. You should have stayed. Things are changing. What's changing? I doubt since 2 years since we chatted about this last, that things have changed at all.
Jesus had a pastoral voice, which was directed towards the people, the sinners, the people who already knew that they were not complete. They had not arrived yet. People who knew that they needed some kind of metanoia. They needed some kind of change, whether it was healing, whether it was spiritual thought change. Jesus was very pastoral to those people.
Yeah.
But he used his prophetic voice when he was talking about leadership. I have a problem with the word leadership. Church officials are only leaders when they actually lead. John Paulson was a leader. He was a spiritual leader. I learned spiritually from him. Don Schneider was a spiritual leader. I've known him since I was a small child. My dad was his pastor when he was a small child, and I was a smaller child. And Don was a spiritual leader. But for most of my adult life, the people at the top of the church hierarchy have been managers, not leaders. They have not been spiritually inspiring people. They've managed the organization. Yeah. I cannot use the term leadership to describe that.
Yeah.
And I'm using my prophetic voice now when I say that. Yeah. And it's a challenge because back to your theology will never be better than your anthropology. Well, this goes a little bit into sociology. Organizational sociology says every human organization by the third generation will give up its founding purpose. And from that time on, the driving force in the organization will be organizational survival.
Yes, wow.
And I grew up believing that we had an Adventist exception to that.
Yes.
I don't believe that anymore because I've seen it happen. It took us 4, maybe 5 generations to get to that point, although you did remind me that James White was pretty hierarchical in his thinking.
And so was Butler, who took over from him.
Yeah. But
in fact, as I think back,
we really have come to the place where the church is driven by self-preservation and numbers and success by how many millions more people join the church. We do not want to look at how that 40% of young people in North America have gone out the back door.
Yeah. And regardless of if James was hierarchical or not, there was still 3 generations, and you can see in Adventist history where that shift you talk of happens, where they're more about how do we keep this together rather than that special, unique purpose they felt at the start.
Yeah.
So it even goes beyond a patriarchal system and a hierarchy. It's like a human nature thing.
So we have this thing called clinging. We cling to what we really trust. And we cling to stability in the church because in some way we believe that the church is significant enough to get us through all the trouble ahead. And so when someone says something about this thing that we're clinging to, that we've placed our trust in instead of in Jesus, instead of the Holy Spirit's work in our life, we're going to push back against anybody who criticizes it.
Yes, boy, I'm glad you've said that, because that puts that whole conversation about the
And
picture into
this,
perspective for me, because I'm criticizing their identity, not just
oh,
not the content. So they view me as doing the ad hominem attack. They feel I'm attacking them when I
yeah,
criticize their system.
that's part of
Wow.
parochialism, is to have a weak boundary between my individual identity and the organizational identity,
Okay,
and to have those confused.
this is an epiphany for me. How do I then speak to the Pharaoh, but respect and not ad hominem attack them? Not because if I know that, wow, if I criticize someone's system or belief or theological stance, many people take that as an attack on them. And I can understand why they were so upset with me now,
Yeah.
because they think I'm attacking them.
Well, it's threatening.
So how can
Yeah,
I, that's the big question. Anyone that wants to be a dissident and agitate and help, give it back to the Pharaohs and the Pharisees a bit, how do we approach them and make them feel safe and not attack their identity, but still work at some possible thoughts and changes?
okay, I'm going to give you another piece of my growth.
Yes.
And this is one I'm not finished with yet, so I can't tell you what the end story is.
We're all works in progress. I am.
Yes, we are. For a long time, I've had a spiritual mentor here in Colorado that has challenged me and has clearly somebody who lived with a higher level of consciousness than I did. And in a very nice way, continued to show how much more possibility there was to grow and to learn. And actually, as a father and son, the father was my mentor formally, but he died, and his son has been involved in a house church small group. And one day he made the observation. He made two observations at different times, which I had a hard time putting together. He said, Glenn, when you walk in the door of this house, I know you're here, even though I don't see you or hear you, or I don't hear someone welcoming you. He said, when you walk into the room, the potentiality for what can happen in the room changes.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've had patients tell me that too. I had a patient, maybe 5 years ago, that I had been referred to by doctors and nurses. And so I went to the patient's room, and before I went in the door, I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? I don't really think I understand what's going on. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Oh, wait, I don't have to know all that before I go in the room. I just need to go in the room because God's going in with me.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a conversation, and the patient's going to tell me something.
Yeah.
And I'm going in with the Spirit, under the Spirit's direction. I don't have to have the answer before I go in. I just need to go in. So I opened the door, went in. I took a deep breath and introduced myself to the patient and said, nurses are really, really interested in what we can do to help your healing process. I know you've had surgery and, they fixed a problem, but the healing doesn't seem to be going as well as it might. And I have the time to talk with you about this if you have some thoughts. And so we had a really interesting conversation. We discovered some things that could make a difference. And at some point, it was clear that we were finished with that conversation, and it was time for me to go. He was tired. He needed some rest, which patients in medical hospital often need. And so we were winding the conversation down, and I was getting ready to turn around and walk out of the room. He says, Chaplain Glenn, wait a minute. There's something I want to tell you. When you walked in the door, before I knew who you were, before you introduced yourself, before you said anything, peace walked in the door with you.
And that's a strength.
It was. I just said I'm really glad that happened for you. It probably made our conversation easier. And he said, yes, it certainly did. Because I did not know who was coming through my door.
That's
Okay.
profound.
So Mentor Junior said that to me. But at another time, he said to me, I read what you write on Facebook. And you're different on Facebook. And what you say when you're talking to people about religious and spiritual things on Facebook has a different effect than what happens in this room when you come into this room. And so this was probably 2-3 years ago he said this. I've been working on that ever since.
Yeah.
And I realized that a lot of it has to do with the medium.
Yes.
The medium is the message.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that red sign behind you.
Yeah.
SDAQ&A
Yeah.
is a medium.
Yeah.
And it is a medium of exchange of ideas. That is not conducive to love and peace.
Yes.
It is.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. It is conducive to crucial conversations, to difficult conversations. If we are not just giving answers, but we're also asking questions, that means there might be some uncertainty. And this is not unique to Adventists. It's true of all evangelical Christians, which we're on the border of. It's true of Protestants, and it's even true of Catholics. That was it George Knight that's talked about the myths of Adventism? Well, one of the great myths of spirituality in the Christian tradition is the myth of certainty. And there are more people that cling to that than to anything else in the Adventist Church. And we have specifically recruited that kind of people as members by making our evangelism about doctrine and prophecy. Two places where we preach certainty, where other people may have a little more room for discussion. So we have for decades, for generations now, recruited more and more people who want certainty or have a need for certainty.
Yes.
So when we have Q&A,
it's almost like, and red flag.
Yes. Uncertainty.
Yes. And look,
so people who want certainty will cling to certainty.
Yes. And they won't come here because
they'll
watch from the wings because they want. Boy, you've blown my mind today. You've blown my mind, and I thank you. Because I'm going away. It'll be funny if someone watches just at the beginning and they see a bit of my passion and angst, and they don't watch right to the end. They're going to miss this. But anyway, that's the fate of long form interviews.
Yeah,
I feel like I've had a mirror on. Looking back at myself in a self-reflective way for the last couple of years now. I want to be a better person. I want to be a better father. I've got 2 young girls started late in life. They're 10 and 11 now. Love them to bits. They're my everything. They're my center. And I want to be a better father, a better husband, this sort of stuff. I'm not beating myself over the head about it.
Right.
I'm not got nothing to prove. I'm not striving anymore even, but I just want to observe and that's a better thing. And that's what's happened today. I'm going, right. I like a bit of pushback and a bit of biffo and a bit of a robust conversation and challenging people. What do they believe? Why do they believe it? Can they defend it? But what I'm realizing is my hoity-toity, that person said this to me, and they're attacking me, my character. I've just realized I was doing the same to them. Totally not realizing. I'm sitting there going, I'm attacking their identity when I thought that they were like me. I can separate my identity from my beliefs. So if someone attacks my beliefs, I'm like, oh, cool, let's look at that.
Yeah.
Whereas so I'm thinking they're like me, which is, 101 silly in psychology. I'm seeing them now as, what they are taking is I'm attacking them. No wonder they're replying like they are. I'm not confused anymore. I know why they're replying, because they are literally feeling hurt and attacked personally.
Yeah.
So I want to try and learn how I can still have a robust conversation and be the street epistemologist. I want to still challenge them and say, well, why do you believe that? Can you defend it?
Yeah.
Can you give me some advice? This is like turning into a personal counseling session. Can you give me some, send me the bill. But can you give me some advice on how I can approach a conversation like I was having there with Grenville, where I am genuinely his friend, and we can have these. I don't care if it's Biffo with he and I.
Yeah.
But I do want to.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yes.
I had another mentor.
Exactly.
That I met when I was in Hawaii, living there, working there. But he's now back on the big island like I am. And we still are in touch with each other, although I haven't been to any of his intensive training sessions lately. We still push each other back and forth. But he said, never be in love with your methods. Be in love with your message. He's Christian. He's former NFL player, former addict, cocaine addict. He's now a corporate trainer and consultant. But when I met him, he was doing most of his work in the Christian world and doing experiential education for people. And he really got into these questions deeply and powerfully. And that was one of the things he said was, be in love with the big picture of what it is that you want to see happen, but don't be in love with your methods.
Yeah. So I don't want to ask you that question then now, because I don't want a method to how to approach it. But what I need to do is just love, put love into practice.
Well, I will,
and I can say to someone like Grenville, man, I love you as a brother. We don't agree. What are some of the core beliefs? I mean, that's just one way you can do it. As long as you're not attacking the person, and you can somehow tease apart what is the belief, what is the systemic problem, what is the issue we're talking about. Let's talk about that. Let's put that on the table instead of backwards, forwards attacking each other.
Okay, one more word that I want to bring into the conversation. Alliance. Alliance.
Oh, that's a good one.
Another one of my learning experiences. I have at times been responsible for a hospital's patient experience satisfaction scores. As a result of that experience, in one of the hospitals that I worked in towards the end of my career before retirement, we had some issues with patient satisfaction, and there was a group of us who were allowed to take on that question and to see if we could do something about it. And I think I might have been the only one in the group that didn't have a formal leadership title at the time, because I'd come back to my roots as a patient care chaplain. But I had this experience in my background. So we were sitting around the table talking, what could we do here? And so I identified some of the things that I had learned in working with some of the best consultants in the country on patient satisfaction. And one of the nursing leaders said, Glenn, I would like you to help my unit because we're the worst in the hospital with our patient satisfaction. And I said, all right. And so we agreed that we would have a meeting to talk together about what could happen. Well, to make a very long story short, we decided to do a pilot study to take that unit and, first of all, find out why there was a problem there that was worse than other places. We very quickly found out, as we talked about the patients, that that unit had more patients who didn't plan to come to the hospital than any other unit. They either came, it was the cardiac unit, the heart unit.
Right.
Not the heart surgery unit, but the one where people with heart attacks or chest pain or rhythm problems, that morning they were about their life and they were doing their daily whatever it was. They were on their way to work, or maybe they came to the doctor's office that morning and the doctor said, "Oh, I think there's something here that I can't do in the office. You need to go to the hospital." Or they had come into the emergency room because they had chest pain, or they were brought by an ambulance because they'd had a heart attack. This unit had people who didn't expect to be here today. Whereas most units in the hospital, people had been prepared. They were ready to come to the hospital. They had somebody taking care of their cats and dogs and plants, and they locked the door before they left home. So all these people on this unit were anxious. They weren't expected to be here. They had other plans for today. And we also discovered that a very high percentage of those people had had some negative experience in healthcare before, and this disrupted day brought those things back to their mind. So they came to the unit with a sense of foreboding. So what we did was we redesigned the chaplain's role for that unit, and I became the chaplain for that unit. And I started getting calls from them as soon as the emergency room had a patient who was going to be assigned to the unit. I would go to the emergency room. I would meet that patient. I would tell them who their nurse was going to be and why I like that nurse. And why they could expect to have really excellent care from that nurse. And by the way, your doctor is really good at X. And so I was setting them up for a positive confirmation bias. And counteracting their negative confirmation bias. What we came to understand as we saw, we actually proved that this worked. What we came to understand is that we were turning people who came with a sense of foreboding, we were turning them into allies of the healthcare team, and we were setting them up to understand the healthcare team as an alliance in their favor. And it only took one positive interaction with a nurse or a doctor to confirm that, and they were leaning in a positive direction.
That is fascinating. I've read a book called, and this is one of those moments where, I know this. I'm glad Glenn's reminding me and giving me some epiphanies. There's a great book called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, I think his name.
I haven't read it, but I love the word.
It is incredible. And the actual scientific empirical data that goes along with it is mind-blowing. One quick example, if there's a candidate, that was done in American politics, but if there's a candidate, two candidates going for a position of governor or whatever, I don't know, if in their advertising, if there's, say, 100 people that are on the fence, they're not sure which way to go. You've got people that are definitely going to vote one way or the other on both sides. But that bunch in the middle, before they vote, if you want to persuade, look what's happening in the back. How did that happen? Before they vote, no, it's not a word. If you use any kind of negative word in your persuasion to get them to vote for you, that on the fence people, 90% will not vote for you. Purely in the wording. And I've experimented with this, believe it or not. I've got some other Facebook groups that are all about love and connection and communication and have nothing to do with robust, total different sign in the background. And I experimented in some of the advertising for events that we run. And if there's a thread and someone, so there's an audience going, will we go or not? This to them. If in the thread someone writes, hey, I can't come, have a great time, guys, you'd think that's positive. But because they've said, I can't come, the persuasion for the audience watching on, I've noticed massive drop-offs in people coming to that event. And so I watch those threads like a hawk, and I delete anything that says anything negative. And we've doubled our audience. So this idea that you've raised there, where you go in pre the experience happening and you're telling the people a little bit about what they can expect in a positive way, has a huge outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we raised the patient satisfaction on that unit significantly. That was the front door. We also had a back door solution. We had an AmeriCorps volunteer that was helping people plan their transition to home and to make sure they got their pharmacy connections right and their next appointment with their doctor set up right, so that not only when they entered did we make things better, but at the end we sealed it.
Sealed the deal. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. Man, I've loved our conversation today. And I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate your time. I really loved our last conversation, but I think in that 2-year period, I'm feeling a lot more relaxed, and even though it may not have come across that way, I'm way happier with who I am and where I'm going. And just 2 quick things to finish off with. That post we're talking about, the 2-year ago one, when the people started, or when that negative pushback was, I only really said 2 comments. It was all go, like I said, over 1,000 comments. As I just stepped back. I didn't even read most of it. But what I noticed is that here at SDAQ&A, in that 1 week after, the stats that I get through here showed that we had 75 new subscribers and over 11,000 views of our videos. Like, people went back and watched older ones and looked at new ones. And in 1 week, 11,000. Now, when I do my nice, happy, clappy, unicorn, love Jesus Facebook groups, and you're having all positive stuff, you might have 11 comments, 3 likes. What is it that people gravitate around this kind of? I bet when Jesus cleared the temple, the community were talking about it for weeks and weeks.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
it's a bit of an aside to the conversation, but just because I've got you here and a bit of your insight, I'd appreciate why that is. Why is that negative stuff? Well, I mean, I'm thanking those guys. That's brilliant. That helped my algorithms. It was great.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy around it. For one thing. For another thing, if you want to read something that would help explain some of that, it would be Walter Brueggemann's book, The Prophetic Imagination.
Right.
I had a colleague give me that book as a gift about 5 years ago. And I started reading it, and I was like, well, I saw the title, and I went like, why are you giving me this? She said, read it.
What's it called again?
Find out. And I started reading it, and I started seeing myself.
What's it called again? I'm just going to write that down as well.
The Prophetic Imagination.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So
it's not a book about Ellen White, is it?
No. It's Walter Brueggemann is one of the great thinkers in the theological realm, as far as I'm concerned. And he's got very good anthropology as well as theology, and he understands how the prophetic imagination is a necessary element of complete ministry. Not everyone has it, not everyone needs it, not everyone's role requires it, but it is absolutely essential to the health of the spiritual community to have the prophetic imagination present to lift up things that need to be looked at. Absolutely essential. But as we know, no prophet is appreciated in their own country. And I understood, I mean, you and I both know that ever since we were children. But once I read Brueggemann's book, I began to understand how that was happening and how essential it is to the process. It cannot be separated from the process.
Yeah, boy, that's great. I'm gonna get both of those books you mentioned, the conversation one and the Brueggemann one.
Brueggemann's isn't very big either. That's
Yeah,
what I like.
yeah,
Short books.
I like short books.
Pithy.
Yeah, pithy. Hey, look, and I'll just one more thing. I was said two things. There was one more thing. John Kaler. Hey, John, how you going? Good to have you on the program today. Watching. There's two quick things I'll bring up that I thought were good. He points out if you fall in love with your hypothesis, this leads to nothing other than confirmation bias.
Right.
And
you have to be willing to look at the data.
Yes. And he mentioned
even if you don't like what it says.
I know. That's a big one. He says all cults meld identity with the system.
Yeah.
It seems.
Right.
And in closing, you see that in how special the great controversy paradigm is for such a special and chosen and remnant people. So if you feel you're a special church with a special message, a plan of salvation that you have been given to impart to the world, you're going to meld your identity closer to that. You're going to be way more sensitive to people's criticisms of what you believe. And I wonder if there's a bit of a spectrum of mental health that can be connected to that concept of how closely you hold your identity, your beliefs, to how well you can separate them. I wonder if that's a mental health kind of. I know that when I was younger, I was exactly like those guys. I was writing, commenting to anyone that was criticizing my church. Stay in the church. I took it personally. The happier I am now, I go to sleep happy every night. I love my life. And I kind of don't give two hoots anymore about they're very separate for me, who I am and what I believe, because sometimes what I believe can change, very quickly based on evidence or whatever. Have you read any correlations between someone's happiness and mental health on those grounds?
Yes. As long as everything goes well, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, a person can be happy and healthy and have their identity melded with an institution as long as everything goes well. And as long as I'm going to use terms from Women's Ways of Knowing here, as long as the received information that I have taken in from my infallible authorities is good enough to help me navigate life, it's all right. But as soon as life throws a curve in my direction that cannot be navigated effectively by the information I have received from these infallible authorities, now we got a problem. And that's when it becomes mentally unhealthy to have my identity meshed with the organization to which those infallible authorities belong, whose information has now failed me. It's terribly confusing.
Yes. Yeah. Boy, that has given me a lot of food.
And it makes it very hard. It makes it very hard to know what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. It's confronting. A couple of years ago, I had a real dark night of the soul, that existential crisis.
Yeah.
And I've left the church 8 years ago. So it took about 5 years to really reach ahead. And it was very dark and difficult to work through. And I had no help working through it. It was just me on my own. I was literally stuck in isolation in a hotel for 10 days and had been on traveling on my own a very long distance to that destination. So I had COVID, isolated in a hotel, and it hit, and it's very hard to face. And we'll close on something that Cindy Lou has said, and I'll just read two parts into one because Facebook interrupted what she'd said. It didn't finish. Hang on. Mr. Sackett, you could earn an additional fortune if you wanted to do seminars and workshops. So thanks, Cindy Lou, for that. I agree.
Well, I'm actually doing one tomorrow.
That's right. Can you tell us a bit
for
about that?
Brew Theology group in Denver.
Is it online? People are going to be able to.
Yeah, I sent you a link which you can post.
Let's see if I can quickly bring that up.
That was in the
Messenger,
the Messenger app. Yeah, yeah, it will be online.
Is that the Cultivating Your Resilience?
Cultivating Resilience, yes.
I'm actually going to.
Which is built, as most of my work is on, I'm like the circus rider with one foot on each of two horses.
Right.
It is built on both theological and scientific foundations.
Fantastic. I love that. I'm just typing that in as we speak. So Cindy Lou, if you have a look, I've added it to your comment and also to the general thread if people want to look at that. And maybe you'll have some workshops and seminars and put together a series that would help people, because I think your combination of science, knowledge, experience, and understanding of Jesus. What are the three? Jesus matters.
Jesus first, love matters most, ministry is service.
Yes. I think you could do a wonderful series there and put them up online and earn some passive income and really help people, because I think your ability to articulate these thoughts, and sorry if I've pushed back sometimes on some of them, I do that with a genuine desire to learn and become a better person, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I completely convinced that we are allies in this.
Yes.
I do not have any problem with pushback or questions.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I think that's, I think
I'm going to push that one little bit farther, and I'm going to say that my wife came home either yesterday or today with a card that said, she grew up in Texas. You can take the girl out of Texas, but you can't take Texas out of the girl. And I know you left the church 8 years ago.
Yeah, people often say this.
But you still have a heart for it, or you wouldn't be doing this.
It's funny when people say, "Oh, should I leave or not?" I've discovered you can actually leave and still have friends and community. And I mean, honestly, like the women's ordination vote was that was my lightning strike. But then I also got and I believe the sanctuary doctrine is totally unbiblical, and I don't believe Ellen White actually is a prophet, and I don't think she ever spoke to God. And I have all those other Adventist kind of things that have fallen away. But I hope in some ways that I'm normalizing for people if they want to leave. I definitely don't think people should leave, but I'm hopefully normalizing that if people do leave, it's okay. But you do need to seek help from people like yourself.
It's really important to have a place for this kind of conversation.
Yeah. Look, I don't know if you got...
For people who are close to the border of the church, whether they're slightly inside or slightly outside, or whether they got one foot in both worlds, doesn't matter to me. It's really important to have this conversation place.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate to have, I mentioned that there was over 1,000 comments, and I got the pushback from people. 90% was positive.
So, yeah, but we noticed the negative ones.
We noticed the negative, and then I'm now noticing my negative, and you might have changed the whole of my approach here. We might drop from 6,000 followers down to only 200 because it's going to be more. So how do you feel? And look, I'm not attacking your identity. I just want to talk about what you believe, and let's unpack it together. People will leave in droves.
One of the principles of conversation is that, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg who said, the positive merely whispers to us, the negative shouts.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we have data that says that in any team there must be 5 positive statements to every negative one for there not to be a negative balance.
Wow. Boy, that's good.
And they can predict a team's success based simply on analyzing the conversation on positive and negatives.
Yeah, that's a bit to the persuasion thing I was saying.
Yeah.
That 90% of those on the fence, any hint of negative, they're gone. They're not going to vote for that person.
Yeah.
How can I remember that? Where did that quote come from? The five positives to 1 negative. If you find it, can you send that to me in Messenger? I'd love to
I will do
explore that. And I'll
Look it
write it up here above my computer, and I'll read it every day before I come in. And then I'll go, oh, boy, I love your ministry, and thanks for that. And this is good. By the way, do you really believe Ellen White's a prophet? Hey, been so good talking to you today,
Good talking
Glenn.
with you.
Absolutely loved it. And thanks for your nice comment about my music there before. If people want to go and listen to that album, oh, wrong one. Hang on. Where this one here? Yes, if you want to go and listen, I'm just speaking to the audience now. You can scan that QR code, and that will take you to Standing at the Cross, Peter Dixon Band. That song that plays at the beginning, another one called Never Be the Same. The whole album is that mellow kind of stuff. So
right there on Spotify already.
awesome. Yay. And if you'd like to support my channel, I'm $20 away from having the amount I need to pay for a year's hosting with the SDAQ&A, not SDAQ&A, SDAQ&A.com. I've got the name. You can't do what do they call the little ampersand, yeah, which is associated with women's ordination. You can't get that in a .com, unfortunately. But
I have one of those little brass
ampersand lapels. Yes,
lapel, and I rarely wear a lapel anymore. But
yes, I'm only, I think, $20 away. Thanks to people who have donated this week. I really want to get this website up and running. Stephen Beagle's helped me with a real basic one, and I now want to just go a bit the extra hog and get a really good site there to put links to all the different seasons and whatnot. So yeah, thank you very much. And one last quick little.
Do you have my email in somewhere? Because I'm thinking if people are saying we could use a seminar or a webinar about some of this, I'm happy to talk with people.
Let's just give that one little PayPal plug there for me, and then I can take it off the screen. PayPal.me/Peter Dixon Music, which is the same as the QR code. And can I type up on the messages here your email if people want to get in touch with you, and that way it'll come up in the comments there. What is your email?
Glenn, Glenn, Sackett, Sackett,
yep,
@gmail.com.
And let's just double check that has come up right.
Or through Facebook Messenger.
And yep. But there, I'll just bring that up onto the screen so people watching in future can see it as well. But I honestly think, I've done over 300 interviews, and you're in the top 3 people I've interviewed that actually have this concept of pastoral care that is offered so graciously, but it's kind of systematic. You've got an approach that I think people could nestle into and really benefit from. So if anyone wants to contact Glenn, that's the email down there. And maybe we could work together on producing a series of say the 3 again, the 3 important takeaways.
Jesus first. Love matters most. Ministry is service.
And then we'll add a 4th one, how to push back in a loving way. How to push back the pharaohs. And we could do it where I just ask you questions and we put it up. I've got a company that we host training courses to. There's a friend of mine that set it up, and you just host your 13 or whatever workshops, and people download them and pay for them and whatnot. We can chat about that later.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually have a lot more written about the Adventist priorities, and I actually wrote an article for Adventist Today about it.
Great.
Probably
Fantastic.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah. Any links you want to add, just send them to me and I'll add them in the description later as well.
Okay.
Everyone, my very special guest today has been Glenn Sackett, and he's apprentice of Jesus. It's been great to have him on the program. Next week, off the top of my head, I'm interviewing Gillian Ford. Can't wait for that. And Ryan Bell, who wrote a podcast, I think, called A Year Without God. He was an Adventist pastor, and he is going to be on the show next week. He's someone I've been trying to get on the show for maybe 5 years, and it's so good to be able to have him on the program. Good night, everyone in America. Good afternoon, everyone in Australia. Hope you're sleeping well if you're in Europe. And good night, Glenn. We'll see you again. Let's do this again.
All right.
Good night.
See you.
See you later, everyone.